Now, where the hell Jarrett went at? Now, how that happened? Hey there, beautiful people. Welcome to FANTI, the podcast for all those complex and complicado conversations about the gray areas in our lives. I'm Tre'vell Anderson.
And I have never felt so good about gaining 15 pounds. Jarrett Hill coming up on the show this week. I've gained a lot in the last few weeks, and I'm feeling good about it. I've been eating. I've been having a good time. What is all this face? You ain't been eating?
Let's keep going, beloved.
We coming up on the show today, it is World AIDS Day tomorrow as this episode comes out, and we are going to be talking about HIV, and we're kind of transitioning into that right now as we get started. I am in an interesting place on this episode because this is something that I actually don't talk about very often or very much, and in turn, I don't get asked about it very often, but it being World AIDS Day, I wanted to take a moment and take a bit of space here to have some conversation around my own experience being HIV positive. And as I was saying, I don't know how to talk about this because it's something that I don't talk about. And Tre'vell and I in our meeting planning for today's episode, I was saying, like, I don't even know where to begin because it's something that I don't talk about. So Tre'vell wants to ask questions. We're going to kind of take it that direction. And then we'll be joined by some, well, I told Tre'vell to have some questions just in case also.
I'm about to say, please clarify that for the people, okay?
Be on my side, friend. Support me, bitch.
I just want to smooth out. Let's iron out the wrinkle of that statement. I
love the way that you said "earn," but we'll deal with that another day.
That's for my people. We see each other. The podcast. But yes, you said you expressed, or I witnessed the, I don't know if we're calling it uncertainty or uncomfort or just lack of practice, with talking about, your journey being positive. But I offered, because, she is an interviewer, to
allegedly, from what we're told,
provide some questions, cut it out, to provide some questions, that might help you tell that story. So, Jarrett, I think it's probably good for us to start with some of the basics. I think this is maybe the second time that you have mentioned that you're pos on the show, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that first time was after you made a social media post a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So for the folks who didn't see that social media post, who didn't listen to that episode, can you, give us the basic? How long have you been positive? What was your journey, etc., etc.?
Oh, is that all?
That's where we'll start.
I came out about being positive 2 years ago on World AIDS Day. Having seen multiple other people that I know talking about being positive that day on social media, it had been something that I already decided I was comfortable with talking about publicly at that point, but hadn't figured out how to do it. And like you and I always talk about our work and our lives being so linked to one another. And so I was thinking to myself, like, I don't know if it's something I should do in an article or if I should write something or if I should do, like, I wasn't sure. But then I also felt weird about asking that question because it felt opportunistic or whatever it was. And so I was having some issues around that as well. And then when I saw other people posting about it, I also knew that there were plenty of other people that were positive that I was aware of that I've never heard say it. And it made me concerned that I was waiting for no reason, but also feeling liberated by seeing other people coming out about it. And so that's why I did it when I did. I've been positive for 11 years. And like, as I was saying to you at our meeting yesterday, when I became positive, I didn't tell anybody for 2 years, other than like a doctor, someone I was hooking up with, or that was really it, right? If I was going to be having sex with someone or if I was in a doctor situation, I was always comfortable disclosing that information. But like, I wasn't telling my friends. I didn't tell my friends for 2+ years, and they were kind of stunned that I had held it for so long. And it has been something that I don't really think about a whole lot. I said to you yesterday as well that we are in this moment now where I'm like reflecting on it and recognizing like I haven't had a lot of identification with the images that I've seen about what it's like to be positive, or the narrative, or, you know, what we'd also think of as stigma. And so it's just been an interesting journey in that way. I'll leave it there.
I remember when you first told me, it was a very...
I forgot about this, and you mentioned it, and I was like, oh God, that is how that happened, isn't it?
And it was to your point about...
You should tell how that was.
Oh, I mean, share your story, beloved.
I mean, you remember it better than me. I was out of town. I had forgotten medication. And I was like, oh, shit.
Yes. And you called me. You called the old trusty Dusty. And you were like, can I go to your house, get your medicine, and FedEx it to you? You know, like overnight it to you. And you know me, I'm just, you know, I like to think that I'm just a ride or die. And I'm like, oh, well, he need me to go get this medicine and send it to him. I don't know what the medicine for. I didn't even look at the bottle. You know, like I could have been nosy, you know, because, you know, you kind of ushered me into your life in that way. But I didn't even look about it. I just got the medicine, put it in the thingamajiggy, and I sent it off. And then the next day, you got the medicine, and you called me, and you were like, well, I guess you know I have HIV now. And I was like, what?
Is that what I said?
It wasn't those words, but it was that sentiment.
Oh
it was
God.
very matter of fact
Oh, God.
about it, you know? And so I mentioned that because, right, in our pre-production meeting, we were trying to navigate this complex, I would say, experience that that you're articulating, which is this, you know, comfort, you say, with disclosing, with talking about your status, talking about your journey. And yet you also remarked that this isn't something that you have a lot of experience talking about publicly. And one of our guests that is about to join us, Daric, wrote a piece for World AIDS Day that will come out tomorrow. We're recording this earlier in the week, but it'll be out for World AIDS Day on Friday when y'all listen. And she, you know, interviewed you about your experiences, and you were talking about how some of the questions that she asked you, you had just not thought about.
Yeah. Well, because it's something I don't talk about very often, it's not something that I get asked about a lot. And because I don't get asked about it a lot, there aren't a lot of questions that I've had to answer around it. Mm-hmm. Other than, again, like if I'm talking to a doctor or someone I'm having sex with, right? Or a romantic partner I'm dating or something. But like I haven't had like a lot of people that I don't know just asking me a bunch of questions. And so when Daric was interviewing me, there are moments where I'm like, there's a bit of a pause. And I'm like, I need to process how to answer that, right? Mm-hmm. And like, I've been trying to figure out, since we started talking about doing this episode, why I don't talk about it. Because in our meeting, you said to me, like, you know, HIV or being positive isn't something that's really a part of, quote, the brand. Mm-hmm. And it hasn't been. And I was like, that really stayed with me as you continued talking for another 35 minutes there. And that was the last thing that I heard you say. But I kept thinking about it because I was like, you know, we have so many conversations on the show about representation, and like really ad nauseum, probably talking about representation. And thinking about that, I'm thinking about like, I've been given, you know, a great platform with this show, with my following and the different places that I get to go. And like, it is something that I've not really talked about. And it makes me wonder, like, am I doing community a disservice by not including conversation around my being positive? That is a conversation that has come up for me as well. And so I've been trying to process that, because the same way we say, like, nobody has to come out of the closet for anybody other than themselves, or any of those kinds of things. I think about that here similarly, but I also think like I'm trying to understand why I haven't talked about it, or why it's something that I don't discuss, because I don't really have guilt or shame around it. I don't have any of those things. So it's been an interesting kind of journey.
Yeah, I look forward to what you come up with as a result of your therapy sessions, because that sounds like, something that, y'all need to tap on.
Oh, that'll be tomorrow. Don't you worry.
But I do, well, one, I do want to just say as like a friend, as somebody who, you told, I do think that there is something there. I don't know how to articulate it as well. But particularly in regards to what you were talking about in terms of the media representations of, I do feel like the last, 5 to 7 years or so, I feel like I've seen a lot more like campaigns, like health related campaigns, or in the stigma related campaigns that aim to, like further diversify the image of what, being HIV positive can look like in culture. But I'm not sure that I have seen those same images, in mass in like popular culture. You know what I mean? In, film, television, on our screens.
Mm.
Like a couple things come to mind that are not quote unquote negative. But so many of the, HIV AIDS related cultural productions that come to mind do paint the community and the lived experience as something to be shameful of. Right.
What's interesting there for me is I don't feel like I've seen many stories I related to in the media as you talk about how we think about representation. Though one of the only moments that I really felt connected with was when Tre'vell on Pose came, when he learned that he was positive, and that experience that Tre'vell has on the show was something I identified with because I found out I was positive in the hospital. And was not expecting to be learning that information that day, because I had just been tested right prior to that, and it weirded me out, like what's happening with my body. But then I had a friend that was present there as well, and I was trying to figure out how to have a conversation with her about that, and I didn't. I just came out and I acted like everything was fine, and kept moving and just pressed it down. And I remember like what it was like going to sleep that night and like being in a loop of prayer while I was asleep, like, please don't let this be true. Please don't let this be true. Please don't let this be true. And waking up and finding that it was. And so like I held on to it for a long time because I've not really identified with so many of the images that I've seen, but there have just been like little moments where I've like been able to identify with this, identify with that. And as I was saying to you yesterday, I don't know what to do with the fact that I don't identify with so much of what I've seen. Because also I worked, when I lived in Atlanta, I worked at AIDS Atlanta. I worked on AIDS Walk Atlanta. And I was in community with so many people who were positive, but a lot of them, a lot of people were in poor health because I worked at a clinic. Right. And so like I was seeing folks that I was like, oh, I don't want to be positive. I don't want to have that experience. The stigma was hitting me and has stayed with me. And so like ending stigma is something that is even more important to me now because I'm seeing the way that it's had an impact on me as an individual that is living with HIV and trying to figure out how to talk about it.
I think this is a great moment for us to take a break and bring in to this conversation our two guests. So we're going to take a break, y'all. We'll be back after some advertisements. So if you're anything like me, you cooked up a storm over this holiday break, okay? So now you tired of cooking, all right? This is where Factor can come in. This holiday season, fuel up fast for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door by Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal delivery service, okay? Factor's fresh, never-frozen meals are ready in just 2 minutes. All you have to do is heat and enjoy. And you can choose from 35 or more weekly flavor-packed, fresh, never-frozen meals that support a healthy lifestyle. lifestyle and meet your meal preferences, all delivered right to your door. So yes, you can be healthy even without, like trying to be healthy, because they make sure that all the ingredients is like, organic and, good for you and, perfectly seasoned and like all that other stuff. And also, if you're like me, you can customize it. I like to, add a little extra salt, pepper, a little ginger. Okay, maybe a little, maybe a little Old Bay seasoning, depending on what it is. But if you're looking for special occasion meals through the holidays, guess what? You can also level up with their Gourmet Plus options, prepared to perfection by chefs and ready to eat in record time. Enjoy these premium ingredients like some broccolini, some leek, some truffle butter, the asparagus. Listen, Factor, Jarrett has told y'all that he loves Factor. He was, doing Factor before they sponsored the show. I'm new to the Factor, and I like them as well. Head to factormeals.com/FANTI50 and use code FANTI50 to get 50% off. That's code FANTI50 at factormeals.com/FANTI50 to get 50% off.
Welcome back to the FANTI. So we are excited to be joined by two guests to have a little bit more conversation about World AIDS Day. And as we've kind of began having conversation about stigma, I'm excited to be joined by award-winning journalist from the Record News, Daric Cottingham, and HIV physician, Dr. Leo Moore. Welcome, both of you, to FANTI.
Thanks for being here, y'all.
We were just having a conversation around representation and stigma and what my personal experience has been like from like a high-level perspective. Daric, you have talked publicly about your status and being positive, and you're just doing some coverage now that'll be coming out tomorrow, as we talked about, on stigma for World AIDS Day. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience and your reporting?
Yes. On the personal side, I have been positive since I was 19. I'm currently 27, and the story behind that status and becoming positive is one of being a survivor of assault. And for the longest time, stigma and societal notions, especially the ones about deviancy, the notions about queerness and abominations and sins, especially growing up in the South in a religious background, really affected me, and to the point where when I was diagnosed, I was so afraid to tell anyone. I also was on my parents' insurance at the time when I was in college. And so I did not seek treatment. I got really, really sick with pneumonia. And then that was when my friends noticed, and then I told them, and then they were like, no, you're getting treatment. So it was my dad. They made me tell my parents. And that really sparked something in me while I was in college. I started doing fundraising, organizing for HIV and AIDS, hosting different red fashion shows and various other events around campus to raise funds for HIV foundations. And so that sparked in me, being a journalist, also using my voice, my platform, and my reporting to share the stories of other people living with HIV and AIDS, and basically trying to remove the stigma, letting people know that, undetectable means undetectable and you equals you. And so from there, started writing a few personal essays for Extra Magazine in Toronto. And as you all just mentioned, I'm currently been working on a World AIDS Day news package where we'll be profiling a handful of people, speaking about what stigma means to them and what their hopes are for this World AIDS Day when it comes to having the support of people who are not positive and what they can do to eradicate the stigma while we look to find a cure for the disease. And so those articles come out tomorrow, and I'm really excited to share those stories of various people.
So Daric, you talked about having been positive and not telling anyone for a long time and then getting sick. And that is actually what happened to me. I was positive for years before I sought medical treatment, just ignoring it, trying to push it down. But I also, while I wasn't talking about it, trying to not think about it, anytime I had any kind of symptom of anything, if I had a headache, if I had a cough, if I had a sneeze, the thought in the back of my mind was, oh, this is it, right? It's got me, and I'm about to be done here. And so I can't say I was never thinking about it, right? But I was definitely not thinking about it a lot until it came up for me. Dr. Leo, as you hear us both talking about going for long periods of time untreated and kind of dealing with the stigma that was attached to it, that and the ways that we were kind of experiencing it, what comes up for you as a physician hearing that, thinking about what that experience is like?
The first thing that comes up for me is that I'm glad that you all were able to overcome the stigma and actually go and start treatment. Because unfortunately, I lost a friend about a decade ago to HIV who didn't start treatment because of the stigma, and ultimately passed away. And, it was really hard for me, and it continues to be hard. So around this time, it's just a difficult time of reflection about that loss of life, and him having been such an amazing person and actually having worked in this field as well. We met when I was in medical school, and he was getting his MPH at Morehouse School of Medicine. And he had been doing HIV prevention work. And I think, as an openly Black gay man, I know some of the issues that he was dealing with around not being accepted by family, being someone who's doing this work in the community, and then to become positive and feeling that compounded shame of not only being a gay man, but now being a gay man living with HIV. And so what I'm most grateful about when I hear this conversation is that you all overcame that stigma to start on treatment. We know that when people are on treatment, they're able to live as long as people who are not living with HIV. So it's getting past the stigma, getting into care to ultimately, live a long and healthy life.
A few things are in my head. One, I want to shout out the essay that you wrote for Extra that I edited, Daric, that folks should check out because it's really well written. Thank you very much. And really well edited, if I do say so myself. And it's titled How Sneaker Culture Saved My Life. We will have a link to it in the show notes. It's about Daric's journey with sneaker culture and its impact on her life. But it includes information about her journey with HIV. So that's in my mind. Second thing is in my mind is, I just interviewed Coleman Domingo for something, and we talked a little bit about how there's like a generation of Black gay people, specifically Black queer people more broadly, that we kind of lost to HIV AIDS, the height of the epidemic, because, our community was gravely impacted, as well as the white folks communities. And we were talking about how now with, I can't say what we were talking about, but we were talking about
Wow, the embargo and the NDAs are real.
Listen, and I was tapping on that line, baby, just tapping on that line. Anyway, but I bring this up to say, I'm just gonna jump over all of that. It's as if I fast forwarded, 3 minutes. But I say all of that to say, the thing that sticks with me about what both of you said, and then what you just contributed, Dr. Leo, right, is this piece about stigma and how the stigma kind of manifests in so many ways. And I remember when I came out or was forced out, how, the automatic assumption was that, I was going to be positive and that I was going to, like that was just the automatic association that members of the community that I came, up with, had in their mind, that they felt was important enough to tell me to, I guess, deter me, perhaps, and so I resonate with what some of you, with what y'all both have spoken about, just in terms of like the ways that the stigma impacts all of us, both, those of you who are, living with HIV, but also those of us who love those of you, right, who are living with HIV. Daric, this piece in particular that you have that's coming out later this week, and paired with your experience talking about your own journey, what stands out to you about like where we are in this moment now as it relates to conversations and discourse around HIV, AIDS, and statuses and testing and all of the things, versus say almost a decade ago, when you first became positive.
I would say there's been like an incremental growth. There's so much more that can change about eradicating the stigma, and then we're still looking for a cure. I think now more people are a bit more educated. You maybe run into someone who has at least base level knowledge of HIV. They are not, I think of like the 90s sitcoms and like the TV shows. And I think particularly of like the Girlfriends episode when, you know, um, the
Mm.
one character on there is HIV positive and they like cut their finger on a knife and the girls just like jump back like it was just airborne.
Mm-hmm.
I think about that ignorance and how, for me, for the longest time, those were my depictions of it as well. And very similar to your own stories of your queer journeys. For me, I came out at 17 and I have a family member who died from AIDS. And so my mom and my parents just really kind of just, that very faith religious reigned, this is what your life may be like going forward. And me actually then becoming positive not too long, like 2 years after being like out to them, um, really just felt crippling. Now, though, at 27 and being undetectable, I take my medicine every day. It's like I take a vitamin every day. And I see this shift for a lot of people where there's not as much ignorance, but there's such a long way for people to go when they find out that someone have HIV. I remember the conversations when I think I shared that I was HIV positive when I was 20 publicly. And around that time I got so many people saying, well, you don't look like you're HIV positive. And I was like, there's no look to this disease. And so to this day, people still kind of hurl it as a slur. People still kind of make these assumptions that HIV equated to the people living with it are like lepers. They're people that are outcast of society. They're this, they're that, and it's such an ignorant notion because it's so much education out there. I believe Google is free. Um, there are tons of resources that really break it down in a simple way for people. And I think a huge part of it is because overall sex in general, anything around sex, even just another form of an STD beyond HIV, a lot of people are very ignorant or it's so taboo to discuss, where you have such a puritanical culture in the West, even across the world in general, where it's just so taboo to discuss these things. People can't even really discuss like safe sex or what they would like with their partner, and it's even harder doing it on a public platform or in a bigger group of people. And so I think until we get rid of that shame, it's gonna be a really long time until we fully get rid of that stigma and make people feel safe. But I think for me, when I shared my status, it was about basically owning it. I have anxiety, and so for me, one of the things is that I like to control things that I at least can control. And so for me, it weeded out people that had negative notions about HIV once they knew it publicly, whether it was dating or friendships, etc. People just kind of avoided me, which it hurt, but I looked at it in this way of the people that are sticking around, the people that are wanting to be around me, are the type of people I want to be in community with. They're not ignorant about HIV. And so being that open too at a fairly young age, and I was at HBCU and I was fairly active. And so there were people that were younger than me who were finding out about their own diagnosis, and I would get messages from them just thanking me for my transparency. They really also thought that the status, like the diagnosis, ended in death as well, still today. And so being able to just be a resource for people when I didn't really have one myself at that time around that age, has been really important for me. And I think the more that we have that, it normalizes living with the diagnosis and not making people feel shameful about, you know, just being HIV positive and realizing that it's something that you can live with and have a full life.
Dr. Leo, I see you nodding in agreement about shame and stigma and the ways that we hear people talking about it. What's coming up for you there?
So a lot's coming up for me. First, I think it's so important that we have the level of transparency that we're having, that you both are sharing, Jarrett and Daric. I also think that the responsibility around stigma cannot solely rest on people living with HIV. I think there's so much more work that needs to be done in the general community, in the general public, those who are not living with HIV, but who may be affected by HIV. And so, I go back to thinking about recently I attended Cheryl Lee Ralph's Diva Simply Singing event, and they honored Tina Knowles, Miss Tina Knowles, mother of Beyonce. And during her acceptance speech, she talked about Uncle Johnny. Uncle Johnny made my dress, that cheap spandex, she looks a mess. And when she talked about Uncle Johnny, she was open about how much she loved Uncle Johnny, about how much of a caretaker and how loving and how talented and unique Uncle Johnny was, and that Uncle Johnny died from complications of AIDS. So I think there's more that needs to be done in the general public, more people who know of people who died from HIV, more people who know people who are living and thriving with HIV, talking about that as well. So that it's not always just the people living with HIV having to champion this, but also the people who are in the lives of those who are living with HIV.
This makes me think of y'all know maybe y'all don't know. I don't know if y'all listen to the show or not, but my mind be running, okay?
Now I'm nervous.
And cut it out. Two things. So two things came up for me from you, Dr. Leo and Daric, as you were talking, Dr. Leo, about like the role of people who are not positive in doing away with the stigma and supporting the community and all that other stuff. It made me think of Patrick Ian Polk in the show Noah's Ark. And I always sing Patrick Ian Polk's praises, but specifically when it comes to images of HIV positive individuals and the community around HIV positive individuals, Noah's Ark is a yet another great example of of positive representations, and complex and nuanced for sure, but not this humdrum negative type of representation that we've been talking about. And I was also going to bring up Mama Tina. She was at also. I'm glad that the renaissance of it all has allowed her and us the ability to talk more about Uncle Johnny, and us the ability to learn more about him. She was at NABJ, National Association of Black Journalists Convention in Birmingham earlier this year as well. We had this plenary session about Black folks and HIV. I think it was specifically focused on Black women and HIV, their various connections to HIV, and so she was on the panel, whatever. But I bring this up because, Dr. Leo, a few years ago, I feel like I remember there being like this statistic that like half of all black gay people were going to be positive or something. Like, do y'all remember this?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember the discourse around it, and so I remember the discourse around it, but I don't remember like if the broader John Q public was like interpreting the data correctly or whatever. But I wanted to come to you just to give us kind of a data focused kind of lens on what the community, Black queer community, is navigating as it relates to the virus.
So that was back in the early 2010s, I want to say around 2014, that Black gay men and men who have sex with men were projected to have a 1 in 2 lifetime risk of being diagnosed with HIV if there were no changes made to our HIV prevention efforts. So if we didn't increase access to PrEP, if we didn't increase condom use, if we didn't increase, different strategies to prevent HIV, now we still see that, our community, not only Black gay men and intersex with men, but trans gender persons and non-binary persons as well, are disproportionately impacted by HIV. And although there is this focus on ending the HIV epidemic in the United States, we still have a considerable risk of ending the HIV epidemic without narrowing that disparities. And so that's a big reason why we have to tackle this stigma, because we know that stigma affects every aspect of accessing HIV care, from going to get tested to starting on treatment to staying on treatment. Every aspect, is affected by stigma. So we really have to be tackling this more. And I think a big part of tackling it has to be more public education about it, and not just blips around World AIDS Day or other awareness days, but it just needs to be more commonplace. And let's be clear, we need comprehensive sexual health education in schools.
My God, today.
So that way kids are exposed to these things, they understand, and they're able to grow up with less stigma. Because often they're receiving stigmatized messages from family members and others who have not had their own comprehensive sexual health education, right? So,
Come on.
We have to start somewhere. And I think that's one place that we really need to push.
As we wind down our conversation, I'm thinking about the ways that we see stigma show up and want to identify what stigma is. And Dr. Leo, I feel like Dr. Leo and Daric, actually, you both have done a lot more work in this space than I have. Daric, I would love for you to kind of explain what stigma is, right? And how you see it showing up in the world. And then we can kind of talk about how we end it. But Daric, can you kind of explain it to us?
So, stigma is a mark of disgrace with a particular circumstance, quality, or a person, similar to just shame, disgrace, dishonor, and other words that are used with it are stain, taint, blot. And those are all negative connotations. When I think of stigma, I think of the scarlet letter and how it's a thing to oust people from the rest of society, and it's this thing where people tiptoe around and avoid. And so societal stigma and the way that it shows up is the media depictions, the way people casually talk about HIV, and how that fuels the negativity around the people living with the diagnosis, and how that really adds to the ignorance. And it just is like a cycle of there's ignorance, and then it turns into hatred, it turns into bigotry, it turns into really negative aspects that just kind of compound on each other. And so for me, stigma is very much this thing of shame. Like, you should feel, society's telling you if you are HIV positive that you should feel terrible. You should feel like, it's the end of the world. It is something that you should just close off into yourself and isolate about, and not ever discuss or talk about it with anybody. And so that's what stigma means for me. That's how it showed up for me in my own life when I was diagnosed, and how I've seen it show up for others as well, especially in the reporting that I've been doing for World AIDS Day. We kind of hinted at this already, but on World AIDS Day, it's a special day where it's more about corporations and just talking about a possible cure. It's very kind of surface level, very corporate, very capitalistic kind of discussions around the diagnosis, and sometimes it lacks a human element. It really doesn't focus on the people actually living with the disease. And so for me, this news package was really important, where center front it's humanity. It's many profiles of different people of different backgrounds. Some are cis, some are trans, some are non-binary. There's women, men, and non-binary people. It's a whole spectrum, different races, different economic backgrounds of people, all spread across the country. And it was really important for me to show people that no matter what your circumstance is, living with HIV does not mean that your life is over. It does not mean that it's this thing that you have to constantly carry as shameful. And there's a way to just, one, once you're undetectable, you're healthy. You're as healthy as anybody else who was not diagnosed. As long as you continue your treatment, it's not a death sentence. And so with that news package, it was really important for me to kind of capture people in their humanity. So various people shared their thoughts of what they really think is the biggest form of stigma. Jarrett, you shared about how faith communities really add to the negativity by likening being HIV positive with like sins of being a murderer, a killer, and things like that. And I also interviewed New York Times bestselling author George M. Johnson, and they talked about the criminalization of HIV and AIDS and how a lot of those laws were created when we were very still ignorant about the disease, and not a lot of research and treatments were available, and the laws need to catch up with the current like medical treatments that are available for people, because there's so many different methods now of there's treatment for people with HIV where you can become undetectable, but then there's people that can take PrEP and things to help them before even being diagnosed, to take a proactive approach in eradicating the diagnosis and disease in society. And a lot of that information, sadly, is so taboo to talk about that it kind of just really adds to the stigma. It makes it so hard to really get rid of this shame that they're forcing on a group of people and just choosing to not talk about.
Dr. Leo, I want to let you pick up there as we're talking about the ways that stigma shows up and the ways that we can combat it.
Yeah, Daric, you hit on so many amazing points and so many important points. One thing that comes to me around PrEP, because I briefly mentioned how stigma affects HIV testing and diagnosis and treatment, but it also greatly affects people accessing PrEP and PEP as well, because of the concern that, if I'm on this medication, then people are going to think that I'm living with HIV. And because of the stigma that is attached to living with HIV, it's preventing a lot of people in our community from even considering taking PrEP and PEP. I think we also have to think about medical mistrust and distrust, which is rooted in real historical traumas that have happened in our community, and how those also impact our willingness, our interest, our desire to start on any medical treatment, outside of HIV treatment or prevention as well. So we have some big things that we have to tackle if we're going to truly end HIV stigma. But one thing that I'm clear about is that it's going to take multiple levels for us to end HIV stigma. Daric also talked about HIV criminalization. As long as we have those laws on the books in many of our states, particularly in a lot of the southern states, then that only continues to perpetuate that stigma, right? So we really have to think about how we get at it at that high level, as well as at these conversations, what I like to call kitchen table conversations, where family members are just talking in a very relaxed environment, and sharing amongst each other. Like, we come from a community of storytellers. Like, the more that we're able, to talk to each other and have these honest conversations, the more we're really able to eliminate stigma.
As we're talking about this, I'm thinking about how stigma has shown up for me and how similar it feels to various other things. I remember being asked multiple times, like, about being a kid and like knowing when I was 6 years old that I liked a boy, but I couldn't say that, but I didn't know why, right? Something about the feeling that I was having that I couldn't name at the time. I didn't know it was gay. I didn't know it was attraction. I just knew I felt something about that boy, but I shouldn't say that. Similarly, I feel like we see stigma show up, right? Like Daric, and the piece I talk about, or in the interview with you, I talked about it at church. And like, my own pastor has talked about HIV in ways that have been really damaging and kind of alarming, and demonstrated for me an ignorance of HIV and the way that it shows up in the world and how it impacts people's lives, from a person who I think of as incredibly smart, right? And as really having a valuable perspective, and offering me things that are so valuable to my life, but then also saying shit like that. Right. And like comparing me to comparing people who are HIV positive, not me specifically, but also me, to, looping us in with people who are murderers and drug dealers and all these other things that the church says are bad. And I think about how often we hear things in media about that are coded in homophobia or coded in racism or coded in misogyny and coded in things where it's not like directly being said, but what's being said. Or sometimes it is directly being said and we're clear about that. And I know that some of the work that is for me next is about this work, about how we think about this in faith communities and how we make it better for people who are queer and trans in those spaces. And as I hear you all talking about it, I feel that moving and happening within me. And so I appreciate your perspective and your knowledge and your openness to have this conversation with us today. As we get ready to go, Daric, tell people where they can connect with you and Tre'vell, what's happening on your face? You got like a smirk, like you want to say something.
Nothing. Please keep it going. Please keep it going.
And you went 2 octaves up, so I know that you have something. But tell people where they can find you and connect to the work that you do.
I'm currently a reporter covering news, culture, entertainment, and news. That's RECKON News. I also am on socials at DARICCOTT, Daric Cott. If I have a social account, it's that @ name. I cover so many different aspects of health, mental health, physical, while also talking about how entertainment and media depictions really reflect what's going on in our society. And so you can catch a byline here and there. And the words of the great Tiana Taylor, you can Google me. I pop right on up. And it has links to my portfolio and all of the work that I do as well.
I should also say Daric is one of the new members of our board at NABJLA and doing great work working with our students and events and things like that. So shout out to Daric for joining over at NABJLA. Dr. Leo, talk to us about where people can connect with you and find more about your work.
Awesome. Well, people can connect with me at drleomore.com, DRLEOMOORE.com. You can also connect with me on IG and Facebook at Dr. Leo Moore. And you can also catch me in the December issue of Men's Health magazine. I was recently named Men's Health's 2024 Ultimate Guy winner. Amongst hundreds of applicants, I am the winner, along with Dr. Saul Batista and Daryl Partridge. So if you're online, check out menshealth.com or go and pick up a copy.
I heard that. All right. We are going to take a quick break. We appreciate y'all's being here. When we come back, we're going to get into listener feedback and wrap up the show. We will be right back.
I'm glad you said that because nobody says that.
Can I just say thank you to you for such a thoughtful interview?
Oh my God, yeah, I think you nailed it.
Bullseye. Interviews with creators you'll love and creators you need to know. Listen to the Bullseye podcast only from NPR and Maximum Fun.
Folks, we get it. Keeping up with an actual play podcast in this economy is a tough sell. That's why we have great news for you. The Adventure Zone is changing up its format. We're going to be doing some shorter seasons, more experimental stuff. There's never been a better time to get on board the zone.
And if you're sick of listening to our voices, we get that too. So we're including some guests. On this upcoming one, we've got Kate Welch and Gabe Hicks, who are incredible.
And you want us to try out some new games? You got it. We've got the new Marvel Multiverse RPG. We're using that, and with a really brilliant GM doing it.
It's Dad. What he's saying is it's Dad.
Dad's doing it.
It's Dad doing it.
You can listen every Thursday on MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back, beautiful people. Now we're going to get into our listener feedback segment, reading out some of your messy jaws. And we have an email here from Aaron. Dear Tre'vell, Jarrett, and all the production team. Of course, I'm sad that you all will be wrapping up the show soon. Every time I hear you all say it as of late, it makes my heart hurt. Of course, you're probably inundated with people writing to say thanks and please don't go. I've been listening for 2.5 years, every episode as it rolls out. The FANTI content, personalities, interviews, enlightenment, the complex and complicado, opinions and experiences have been so meaningful and edifying that I wanted you all to know that you have created a well-defined epoch in my life.
Ooh.
Oh, this person is educated, baby. I ain't seen epoch in so long. I don't even know if I'm saying it right. EPOCH.
You're not, but it's fine. I'm kidding.
Anyway, Aaron continues, no exaggeration. There was life before FANTI, during FANTI, and soon to be after FANTI. And so I'm writing simply to say, please know that your efforts have been far-reaching and extremely meaningful. After all, you've had me as a devoted listener out on the vast expanse of the Great Plains. I wish you the absolute best in where you go from here, and thank you sincerely for all the time you've spent dedicated to this venture. You matter, and it made a difference in my life and certainly in others. If any of you ever make it out to Fargo, North Dakota, please remember you have a friend who will pick you up from the airport. Sincerely, Aaron. Aw, thanks, Aaron. You, baby, we gonna have to put you in class, okay? Because, you know. But thank you so much for that, Aaron. It's been really wonderful. Really wonderful to hear how the show has impacted and, you know, manifested in the lives of folks. And yes, as Aaron said, we are winding down here, unfortunately. And so, listen, if you would like to tell us about how amazing we are, we will welcome it. Okay, we will absolutely welcome it. And if you want to write an email, you can do that like Aaron did, or if you would like to drop us a voice memo, which is what I personally would prefer, so that we can get to hear your inflections, you know, in your own voice. You can do that by going to speakpipe.com/FANTI, and we will be listening to them, okay, in a future recent episode. I said future recent because that means it's coming.
A future recent?
That means it's
recent.
Stop it. And now it's time for our dishonorable mentions, okay? These are the stories of the people that caught our attention this week that deserve a call out either for their good or their stupid. Would you like to get us started, Jarrett?
Future recent is like Avengers, future past, whatever. I don't know what that is. All right. I want to give a few shout outs here. Number one, I'll give an honorable mention to Lena Waithe and Chris Ball, who has been on the show. Chris Ball, you might remember from Ball Family Farms. We had a conversation around marijuana, cannabis, and Chris's family runs a Black-owned farm, and one of the very few. And Ball Family Farms and Lena Waithe have partnered together for First Draft, which is Lena's strain of weed, and we've seen that just kind of released here lately. So I want to give a shout out to them. Very excited to get to check it out. I got sent a little something a number of months ago as this was in development, and I had a great old time. So make sure to go check that out from Ball Family Farms. What?
Oh, okay. So she's sending out samples. Mine must have got lost in the mail. I will take that up with her personally. Don't worry.
I was going to say, I mean, she had called me about it.
I'll handle it.
I don't know what happened with you. So
I mean, it's
anyway.
okay. Y'all besties. That's fine. I get it.
It's fine. I want to give an honorable mention to a few different things that I've been watching and really loving. Number one, there's a film on Hulu called Theater Camp. For those of you that watched the movie Camp back in the day, and I've made references to it here on the show, it isn't one of those movies where they go to theater camp, and it is incredibly gay coded. It is hilarious and funny if you're into musicals, if you're into theater. It is a fantastic show. A fantastic film that's available on Hulu right now. I enjoyed it. First of all, I didn't say it was like an extraordinary cinematic feat, but I had a great time.
It was cute. No, it was cute. It was cute. No, it was cute. It absolutely
okay.
was cute. I watched it twice.
The under the breath mumble, I'm leaving it alone. Anyway.
I mean, you compared it. Yes, we gotta go. Keep going.
I also want to give a shout out to a show over on Max called Rebuilding Black Wall Street. It's hosted by Morris Chestnut. I think this is required viewing. Like High on the Hog, I think this is one of those kinds of series. They feature various different stories of Black folks and business owners that live in Tulsa, and the incredible businesses that they are building and the ways that they're working to rebuild the community there. And there's also like just as an aside, Ananda Lewis, who you may know from her days as a VJ and as a personality back in the day.
Yes, Ananda.
Ananda's on the show. It's just a really, really fantastic show.
Where's she been at?
She's got family from Tulsa, so she's there in the show and is like part of the revitalization storytelling. So it's really, really incredible. Last thing I want to give an honorable mention to is a new cereal that I'm in love with, and I hate me for this. For those of us that love Cinnamon Toast Crunch, we already know what she does for us, but there's now Tres Leches Toast Crunch. Y'all did what needed to be done. Let me just say that. Y'all did what needed to be done. And I don't mean that in like a Law Roach kind of way. I mean that in like a Jarrett Hill is very... I said it in a certain kind of way, and I didn't realize I was doing it until it was too late. I'm already in. Go ahead.
Understood. We got you, friend. This is a safe space. It's okay.
Maybe I did mean in a Law Roach
You
kind
can
of
be
way.
yourself here. You can be yourself here. That's all right.
I think I did mean it in a Law Roach kind of way, actually, as I say that.
I think you did, beloved. That's why I made the face.
Go ahead on.
That's why I made the face. To be clear.
Exactly.
Anyway, okay. So I was just inspired by our conversation that we had early in the episode. I kept calling out different moments of good, to me at least, portrayals of HIV in pop culture. So I wanted to do that for my honorable mentions as well. So just want to put some things on y'all radar in case you would like to check things out. There's a really fabulous episode of A Different World. The name of the episode is called If I Should Die Before I Wake. And it's a really great episode in which Tisha Campbell actually plays somebody who is HIV positive. It's a really interesting, it just goes to show how the other characters around her, you would kind of respond to hearing her story and her journey. And I think it was kind of, legendary, impactful for the time that it came out. So check that out. I believe A Different World is still streaming on Max, but, find it wherever you find it. We talked a little bit about the criminalization of HIV, and it reminded me of this story of his name is Michael Johnson, but he's kind of sort of known under the moniker Tiger Mandingo. This was like an HIV criminalization case that happened. The facial expression is earned.
I was just like, whoa, okay, yeah.
It is earned, but it was this story that came out, I want to say 2018, 2019, about this young Black man who, was sentenced to, I think, 30 years for not telling his sex partners that he had HIV. But there was like really racial overtones to the case, and, there was issues around evidence and all this other stuff. Stephen Thrasher was kind of the leading reporter from my memory on that. So just want to throw that out there. And then lastly, there's a movie, I think also on Max, or it's an HBO property at least, starring Queen Latifah, called Life Support, that came out in 2007, that I think was also a not horrible portrayal of folks living with HIV. So y'all check that out, maybe, if that, titillates your fancy. Now it's time for Black History is Happening Every Day. Today, we are shouting out Queen Cougar, a highly respected member of the leather community and also known as Miss San Francisco Leather 1993. For those who don't know, the leather subculture, they have their practices and their styles of dress organized around sexual activities that, involve leather garments such as jackets, vests, boots, chaps, harnesses, and other items. The group is not only a sexual liberation movement, but it quickly turned into a political one during the rise of the HIV/AIDS crisis. Queen Cougar, along with many other queer Black members of the leather community, organized fundraisers for individuals affected by HIV/AIDS and towards research, which has directly led to a lot of the groundbreaking medicine like PrEP, Truvada, etc. that we see today, that we talked a little bit about in our conversation earlier. The group was also persistent in sending messages sex positivity, encouraging their community to still enjoy sex and have fun despite the fears and the concerns around HIV/AIDS. The National AIDS Memorial HIV Story Project has an interview with Queen Cougar called Unsung Heroes, the leather community's response to AIDS. Interview with Queen Cougar. It's on their YouTube channel. We will link it in our show notes so that you can check it out.
All that is going to do it for us. You can check us out on various different platforms. If you have not checked out our brand new book, it is Historically Black Phrases. You can get that everywhere. Good books, and as Tre'vell will let you know, bad books are sold as well. HistoricallyBlackPhrases.com for more information on that. We've got some...
But this one of the good ones, for the record.
Yeah. We've got some cool announcements about what we'll be doing with that coming up soon, so stay tuned. If you have not checked out We See Each Other, a Black trans journey through TV and film, or We See Each Other, the podcast, co-hosted by Tre'vell Anderson and the one and only Shar Jossell, you can go check that out. All those episodes are available for you right now. For those of you that are checking us out on YouTube, you can go to FANTIPodcast.com, get all 3 of the first seasons of this show before we joined the YouTube machine, and go to FANTIPodcast.com for all of those episodes. If you have a comment or suggestion about this week's episode, you can hit us at FANTIPodcast on the Instagram, on the Twitter X, on the TikTok, on the YouTube. Use the hashtag FANTIFam, or you can email us, fanti@MaximumFun.org.
Yes, and it's the holiday season. You should be supporting the wonderful work that the Maximum Fun family is doing. You can do that by going to MaximumFun.org/join. And also, just a reminder, if you would like to send us a little voice memo about the show, maybe you liked it, maybe you didn't like it, you know, if you want to shake the table a little bit, we will accept those voice memos as well. You can do that by going to speakpipe.com/fanti. All right. Our music is brought to you by Corice, COR.ECE, wherever you get wonderful music. Corice just dropped a new single that he's featured on. Check that out.
Yes.
Our graphics are by Ashley Wynn and the folks over at Moonhouse Creative. Our editor is Anne-Marie Huber, and our producer is Palmira Muniz.
And our senior producer is Laura Swisher. This is a production of Maximum Fun.